Thank you. A fast approaching deadline. Georgia election boards must certify the results of the election tonight by 5.
Yeah, here's the countdown. And Atlanta News First Abby Caceres spoke one-on-one with the Secretary of State about what went right and what went wrong this election season.
The process of certification reaffirms the will of the voters. With President-elect Donald Trump winning overwhelmingly here in Georgia, the Secretary of State's office doesn't expect that lawsuits or conspiracies could undermine confidence in election results.
I think there's no question that the results are accurate.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says Election Day was not without drama. More than 60 bomb threats were reported at Georgia polling locations. Those locations were swept by bomb-sniffing dogs, but the threat of foreign adversaries meddling with elections persists.
It was Russia, but next time it could be someone else. You know, there's lots of people that don't like America. So that's really then federal officials have to get involved in.
Election result reporting went smoothly for most of the 159 counties in Georgia. He was able to call the race less than 4 hours after polls closed.
Donald J. Trump has an insurmountable lead with the number of votes outstanding.
The Secretary of State's office is investigating a technical issue in Chatham County, a problem with SD cards delaying the vote count past the midnight election night deadline. They could face fines.
The machines have been through 3 elections, 2022, and now 2024. That's 3 elections, and so what we've shown is the equipment's fine.
Next, the Secretary of State's office will perform post-election audits, including the presidential race and other races down the ballot like House and Senate races. In Atlanta, I'm Abby Caceres.